Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FBC Radio Live. We are on a little bit late today, but it's okay. Technical difficulties are not going to stop us. That's right. It may stop the Buffalo Bills. There's pretty much anything with a little bit of talent stops the Buffalo Bills these days. But it's not going to stop us because we are here. We are ready to talk Monday Night Football, and we're going to give our top five teams. So good morning, John. I told you yesterday, or I told you today, that I wish I would have bit the bullet and went for it and picked the Broncos to win last night, just like I should have picked them a couple weeks ago to beat the Chiefs. But alas, they beat the Bills, and the Bills continue their, dare I say, just a plummet into obscurity.
Yeah, I mean, they're 5-5 right now, right? Like, they have a worse record than the Houston Texans. They have the same record as the Indianapolis Colts. They were 3-1 at one point this year. They looked really good in doing that, but look at what they've done since. They're 2-4 over the last 6 weeks. They're not a good football team right now. They're in trouble.
Let me ask you, what team would you feel confident that they would go into and beat right now? You mentioned Houston. I don't think they'd beat Houston.
I don't know if anybody's beating Houston
No,
these
well,
days, right? Like,
true.
they're just beating everybody. And C.J. Stroud looks like an MVP candidate, and they've got that mojo right now that Buffalo doesn't have. And again, Josh Allen, 2 more interceptions, leads the league with 11 interceptions, other turnovers. He's not the same player he was a couple of years ago since Brian Daboll left to become the head coach of the Giants.
Well, he kind of is, though.
Well, he's reverted back to being what he was beforehand with a lot of turnovers. And he had turnovers with Daboll, but there were fewer.
Yeah, but I don't know. John, honestly, this is who he's been, though. I mean, he's had a couple stretches where, yeah, maybe the ball isn't turned over as frequently, but this is a guy who's led the league since he came into the league in turnovers. And, you know, if you're going to talk about one season out of 5 where he wasn't a turnover machine, well, I'm not going to put too much stock in that. That's going to me, that's more of an aberration than, you know.
I would say 20 and 21, he was really good, took care of the ball. But again, Daboll was his offensive coordinator, and I think he was very comfortable with him. Since Dorsey took over, we've seen a lot of turnovers the last year and a half. So, yeah, I mean, I think I think by nature, he's a risk taker. He's got a lot of Brett Favre in him. Like, he doesn't check down to the easy play as often as he should. If he learns to do that, I think he'll be that much better. And there's a lot of pressure on him because they don't really have a running game. He's the running game. He's got Stephon Diggs, who's an elite receiver who probably is a pain in the butt to deal with because he's always looking for the ball, which a lot of the elite receivers are. But, yeah, it's almost like they haven't recovered from that playoff loss to Kansas City a couple of years ago, where they were this close to advancing to the AFC Championship game and maybe winning the Super Bowl. Even though they went 13-3 last year, they never felt as dominant as they did the 2 years prior. But, yeah, this is a team that right now is on the outside looking in.
Yeah, and look, I don't see it getting any better at this point because, well, what can you change? Again, this isn't like all of a sudden Josh Allen is doing something he doesn't normally do. Again, he turns the ball over. We get it. Their defense isn't as good. They make stupid mental mistakes, and quite frankly, they're not the Patriots, so they don't have that equity to fall back on. Right now, it's like, what do you? If you're going to ask me, like, which team might have a brighter future, is it crazy to say maybe the Patriots, considering how much cap space they have next year and how they can retool their team? Like the Bills.
That's crazy. I think it's crazy because I think Buffalo does have a quarterback that you can get to be better. And yeah, they do. I mean, he's still way more.
Sure, he's better. He's better than Mac Jones. I'm not arguing that, but like,
I still think he's better than a lot of guys. I think he's just is off the rails. And I think you can reel him in a little bit. I don't know how many times I use the word rail in different contexts. But
yeah, well, it's been almost 6 years, John.
Well, again, like, this is 2021. He was outstanding. It wasn't.
Yeah, it's 2023 though. That's my point. Like I think unexpectedly, I think you're defending Josh Allen a little bit, but I'm just saying, like, at this point, why should we give him a leash? I mean, hell, Lamar Jackson gets more criticism, and he has an MVP award. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like Josh Allen is like, again, you just, to me, I look at it and I'm like, the turnovers are and have always been an issue for him. The fact that they it has not changed. Like, he's not good. He's not as good as Brett Favre. Okay. Brett Favre turned the ball over a lot, but Brett Favre was a better quarterback. And look, we're not here to discuss his off the field and him as an individual, but as a football player, yeah, he was a gunslinger. And I think everyone who, people like to call anyone who turns the ball over a lot a gunslinger if they have a hot arm or whatever. But the reality of it is, it's like Brett Favre was the only one who could really get away with that. Like, what other quarterback threw a lot of interceptions and still was able to win? It was Brett Favre.
Mhm.
So to
And
me,
Eli Manning. Eli Manning threw a ton of interceptions.
true.
Somehow led the league in interceptions 3 times. Again, he had the 2 glorious playoff runs, and other than that, a pretty mediocre quarterback. But
Yeah, he's an enigma. He's an enigma.
He really is. Yeah, he's an average quarterback who got hot for 2 postseasons.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, look, I just at this point, it's like, how much slack are you going to give this team? Like, is Sean McDermott going to get any better as a coach? No, I think
no.
Like, again, just like the team, he's kind of plateaued, and we've seen, like, go back a couple years ago when he was far more concerned about a soundbite against the Patriots, and you know what I mean. There's like little things like that now all of a sudden you look at and you're like, oh, okay, well, when the highs were high, you didn't really think about it that much. But now all of a sudden you're seeing, well, this team really hasn't really progressed. They've gone out, they tried to refill some of the players that they lost. The Von Miller thing was a disaster, since he got injured. And now they're just, I mean, we anticipated it being a disaster when they gave all that money to a guy in his 30s for 6 years. But the fact that it didn't even materialize for a full season, kind of, what can you do about that? But again, when you're a football fan and everyone says, oh, wow, that's a nice pickup, but like, how do you give that much money to that guy that's that old for that many years? And at the time, you're like, okay, whatever, it's the Bills. They're taking the next step. They're ready to take the next step. Well, the reality of it is they did take the next step, but it was like 2 steps backwards. And then, Von Miller gets injured. Josh Allen really hasn't, again, evolved. Like we thought he did, John. I think we thought he did. They had a unique and new offense. That's key too, John. They had a new offense. Stephon Diggs just into town. Not a lot of film on it. Josh Allen, look, plenty of athleticism, and I think that's the biggest issue that we have in today's game in evaluating quarterbacks. We see athletic ability, and we equate that to good quarterbacking. And every single time, it always comes back the same. It's like, okay, athleticism doesn't equal great quarterbacking. And we see it. We see it all the time. Josh Allen, great athlete, cannon of an arm. Okay. What's great about his quarterback play? We saw it a couple weeks ago where Tom Brady basically lectured him. Did you see that clip, John?
Yeah.
When they're talking about it, and he was basically saying, like, stop making stupid decisions. And that has nothing to do with his offensive coordinator or the plays that they called. This is kind of like the Mac Jones thing. It's like eventually, the quarterback himself has to own up to making the decisions that they made. Like, I'm pretty sure the playbook for Mac Jones didn't call for him to throw the ball 15 yards under. You know what I mean? And I'm pretty sure the playbook.
Not right.
Right. Well, if that's the case, then we do have some problems. And then in Buffalo, it's like, did the playbook call for Josh Allen to throw a lazy pass in the sidelines at the end of the half with 3 guys in coverage? No, that was lazy, and it was bad decision making. And that's stuff that we see from Josh Allen, and we've had seen from him. What we did was, John, we pushed it to the side because he was a young quarterback, and he did enough things athletically pleasing or aesthetically pleasing, so to speak. Both actually are true. That we kind of were like, oh, no, it's fine. He's a gunslinger. He's got all this talent, blah, 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 blah. Well, it clearly doesn't it doesn't last long term. And certainly eventually, those weaknesses are gonna kind of rear their ugly head. And look, give credit where credit's due. Denver has played phenomenal defensively. Since that giving up 70 points to Denver, or I'm sorry, to Miami. They've beaten Kansas City. They've obviously beaten Buffalo. But this Buffalo team, again, maybe the Steelers. If you look at the landscape of the playoff picture, one team, maybe, and even then, I don't even know if that's possible. One team, I feel like I'd be like kind of confident in Buffalo beating, and that's the Steelers.
Who,
So,
by the way, are 6-3.
yeah, 6-3
and
somehow, and still have been outgained every game.
every single game. Yeah, they've been outscored by 30 points in totality of the year. When they lose, they get blown out. They win every close game, and we've seen teams do that. We saw Minnesota do that last year to a 13-4 record, and sometimes it flips the next season. So yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in Buffalo. Look, they're playing this week. They play the Jets, I believe. The Jets give them a ton of trouble defensively, so that'd probably be a low-scoring game. Then they have to go to Kansas City and Philadelphia. I mean, good luck with that if you're not better prepared than they look to be. And I look at Sean McDermott, and I'm not kidding when I say this. You could see 12 coaching changes this offseason.
Oh, sure.
I'm sure he's on the hot seat because the Bills have the highest payroll in football, over $300 million. So who's going to take the fall for that? Normally the head coach. We can go right through the whole list, whether it's New England, Buffalo, go through the Raiders, could be the Chargers, possibly Tennessee, and then a slew of teams in the NFC, right? Washington, if Dallas falls short in the playoffs, McCarthy could be gone there. Chicago's going to have a new coach. You could also see a new coach in Tampa and Carolina.
Yeah.
There's just team after team after team. You might see 10, 12 new coaches next year, and some of those guys will be recycled. Like if Belichick leaves, I'm sure he'll have a plenty of opportunities to coach next year. Same thing with Vrabel. Maybe not so McDermott because it's kind of falling off the rails there in Buffalo. But yeah, he's coaching for his job right now, and it doesn't look all that promising. They're 2-4 in their last 6, and one of those wins, Ian, was against the Giants, who couldn't get out of their own way. The Giants,
yeah,
the Giants should have beat them, right? They had 2 opportunities to score, once at the end of the half, once at the end of the game. They screwed that up, or they'd be 1-5 in their last 6.
Yeah, no, and like that's concerning if you're Buffalo, because again, you went from probably peaking in that AFC Championship game for those few moments, and then you decided not to play defense.
Yep.
I mean, everyone talks about, what 13 seconds for Patrick Mahomes. Well, I'm pretty sure anyone could have given the ball to Tyreek Hill, watched him run 50 yards wide open, because Buffalo decided, well, we're just not going to guard anyone. We got 13 seconds. We're fine. Well, guess what? You still have to tackle. You still have to make plays. And ever since then, it's just there's been no progress. That was it. That was the apex. That was the height of this Buffalo Bills run. And it's just been on the downswing ever since. And it's really gone down drastically in the last 12 months, really.
They were 13-3 last year. It didn't feel like a dominant 13-3, and then when DeMar Hamlin happened, it seemed like it just took the wind out of their sails at that point. Remember, because they were life and death with the Patriots in the final game of the season. They needed 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns to beat the Patriots. Then they struggled against Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins in the wild card game.
Yep.
And then in inclement weather conditions, Cincinnati just went in there and manhandled them. It was 27-10. It felt like it was 47-10. And that was it. And then look at what they are this year. Right on opening night, Rodgers gets hurt 4 plays in, and they still can't beat the Jets.
Right.
They really have problems with the Jets defense, and they're going to have to solve that this week before they go below 500.
Look, they have problems with every team, John. Like, and that's
right
and that's the thing, and that's why it's like, that's why I sit here and I look at it and I say, I just don't see. Like Josh Allen, good quarterback. I'm not putting him in the elite status anymore. I mean, it was probably premature to begin with, but again, at the same time, Sean, as we see each and every week, there really isn't any sort of elite quarterback play, unless it's apparently CJ Stroud. That's about it. That's all we're seeing in terms of consistent elite quarterback play. But in reality, no, Josh Allen is not a great NFL quarterback. He's not. Let's be honest. If you lead the league in turnover since 2018, you are not a great NFL quarterback. I don't care how many physical tools you have. I don't care that you run like a what are those big horses, Clydesdale. I don't care that you run like a Clydesdale down the sideline and lower your shoulder like a moron, into a linebacker that's bigger than you. Like you're not a great quarterback if you turn the ball over the way he does and plays football the way he does. Sorry,
His my biggest issue with him, and I like the player because he is, to me, exciting to watch, but he has these very high highs. Like, he'll have like 6 or 7, 8 games a year that you go, oh my God, he's John Elway 2.0, right? I mean, he's a bigger guy than John Elway.
Yeah.
He doesn't quite have the arm Elway had because Elway's feet had,
Then he turns into Jay Cutler 2.0,
Right. Or then he turns into like Ryan Fitzpatrick on his bad days. Like,
right.
he has these, then he'll also have 6 or 7 games that you go, oh my God, that's horrible. And then he'll have a few games sprinkled in. And, our two favorite quarterbacks, how many lows did Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady have? Like, they're bad games.
I could probably count on one hand.
Right. Like, they would never, like, you'd say, you got to pull this guy. He's just completely out of it today. And they throw a couple interceptions. I get it. But they never looked like they weren't in command of what they were trying to do. They may not score 35 points every week, but you never felt that they weren't, I was going to say the masters of their domain, but the masters of the huddle. But they were. They were in charge of what they were doing. Their bad days weren't so bad.
No,
right?
It's but like I can sit,
bad days are horrible.
I can sit there and say, okay, you had that game against the Jets for the Patriots, and I'm talking playoff games. Game against the Jets in the playoffs. You had the game against the Ravens. That Chargers game, Brady wasn't particularly good in the AFC Championship game, but that was kind of just a weird game for everyone in that one. In the 2007.
Antonio Cromartie's always kind of had Brady's number for some reason.
Yeah,
he really know how to play defense against them. Some guys, that's just the way it works. So, Ty Law owned Peyton Manning. Ty Law seemed to know where everybody was going with their routes. But there's not a lot of games that you. But with this guy, it's week to week.
Like,
right. Interceptions one week, and then the next week you go, oh my God, he's incredible. And then back to 3 interceptions. It's up and down and up and down.
Well, it's like right there. I listed 3 for Brady, and then I had to stop and pause and think about it for a minute. Because I'm like, okay, like people will say, well, it's Super Bowl 42. No, it wasn't his best game, but he wasn't terrible. Again, like there's people sometimes will sit there and like, I look at Super Bowl 42 and say, yes, it's unfortunate. It's a missed opportunity. He didn't play his best. The offensive line didn't play its best. The whole team didn't really play particularly great at that point. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like a disaster. Like, and again, go to any Super Bowl. They were never out of a Super Bowl. That's why I sit here and I think about, this whole Mahomes Brady discourse. And I'm like, Tom's maybe had one playoff game that has been as bad as what Mahomes was in that Super Bowl. And that was probably that Ravens game where they just were
in 09, right?
Yeah. Where they were just steamrolled from start to finish. The game just was it just wasn't in contest. And like, and to me, I look at that, I'm like, no one brings that up when it comes to discussing those two, but that's a pretty big factor. Like, in 20 some odd years, however many playoff games, like you have maybe 2 or 3 games where you're like, but the problem is, John, the way other people look at it, they look at just the box score numbers and they're like, oh, what are you talking about? He sucked against the Raiders. I'm like, First of all, it was a damn blizzard out there. If anyone remembers, actually half the people that say he sucked probably weren't even alive. But like I remember, he threw I think 317 yards against the Raiders, a team that had not allowed a passer to go above 275 all season. You remember how good that
was good defense?
Yeah, that was
Woodson.
Charles Woodson. You had
all you need to say.
Yeah. I mean,
Eric Allen.
Eric Allen.
Yep. Corner. Yep.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It to me, I look at that and I say, no, stats aren't everything, but you can look at and you can tell when a player is just not playing well. And like I said, I mean, you've had more of those instances from guys like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And I mean, again, we're comparing him to the greatest quarterback of all time. So of course you're probably going to run into these things, but it just I think it just further emphasizes how great Brady was and how ridiculous it is to even suggest that some of these young guys are even approaching that, because you got to let these guys' careers play out. Like again, John, if someone went into a coma in 2021, they would think Josh Allen was probably ascending to the greatest quarterback of all time if they woke up today. But the reality of it is he had a nice stretch, but as of right now, John, that's all it is a nice stretch and not the norm.
Right. No, he hasn't stepped up. And again, wildly inconsistent. If you can have those very high peaks, that's great, but your valleys can't be like below sea level. They have to at least be good games. Like still throw for 275, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Don't have a disastrous turnover that flips the game. He does this like 4 or 5 times a year, and you're not going to win a Super Bowl with that. Because is he going to put together 4 great playoff games? Now, 2 years ago, he put together 2 of the best playoff games I've ever seen, beating the Patriots and the Chiefs. If he got through that game, he probably would have thrown 3 interceptions against the Bengals in the AFC Championship game, because he doesn't string it together the way the truly great quarterbacks do, where they just like game after game after game. It's like, man, this guy is on a roll right now. And back to Brady in that playoff game against the Raiders, I think he completed his last 8 or 10 passes.
Oh, he was.
So I was like, that's what I caught some of those passes. He was so on target.
And that's the thing, that like anyone who comes out and like you see it from national media members, anyone saying, oh, he wasn't really elite until what? It's like, no, just go back and just go back and actually watch. Someone posted a clip yesterday. I think it was from the very first like Colts game, basically his first start, or it might have been his second start just a couple weeks later. Because remember, the Colts back in the day were in the AFC East, which I feel like we might have been robbed of some great matchups. And if only they knew what was about to come over the next 20 years. But there was a pass that he made where, I mean, the guy threw it on a dot 55 yards from almost his end zone to a guy in stride. I think it was David Patton in stride. And it's like, people sit here and will, with a straight face online, say, oh, Brady was just a game manager. Oh, he was just this. Oh, it was mostly the defense. Well, first of all, that's bull. Because all you got to do is go back and look at where each offense and where the offense and defensive units ranked throughout a vast majority of his run. And guess what, John? Surprise, surprise. The offensive units were more consistently better. And I mean, points, yards, DVOA, EPA, all that stuff were all coming up positive for the Patriots on offense. On defense, entirely different story. And that was even true somewhat early on. And I always say, like, look, if you're gonna say some sort of defensive carry job happened, then maybe you can say, well, 2003 was the only time there was any sort of disparity where the defense was greatly or the offense was greatly outranked by the defense. But then you look to the Super Bowl and it was 32-29 and the Patriots gave up multiple fourth quarter leads. A theme, John, in pretty much every one of their Super Bowls.
Yeah, even his 3 Super Bowl losses, he gave his team a lead.
He had a lead at the end of the game in every single one of them.
Yeah, every one of them. Yeah, so he did his job. And his probably greatest Super Bowl performance was in a loss, close to 505 yards against the Eagles. Just his defense gave up 41 points. So yeah, no, I mean, and I'm not going to go off the rails here because we're about to get off the air here. You already have. Go ahead.
No, well, because this is the beauty of Brady, because you say his loss against the Eagles was his greatest Super Bowl performance, and I was about to say, well, no, against Seattle, and then I stopped because I'm like, well, maybe it was against the Falcons, and I'm like, no, maybe it was against the Panthers. No, maybe
that's a sneaky one. Yeah, people forget that Super Bowl for some reason. That's one of the best Super Bowls ever. Yeah, to me, that's one of the best Super Bowls ever.
John,
one of the best performances ever.
That was the first time he set the completions record in the Super Bowl. He broke it twice after that. Right. Like that. Yeah. That's how absurd it was, and that was back when he was a game manager and being carried by the defense. So, anyways, long story short, Josh Allen's got to step it up because this team is. If you're going to ask me right now, are they going to make the playoffs? And I'm like, I don't think so. Because quite frankly, John, it would not shock me if they lose the next 3 games.
And the 4th game is Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, so they're playing the Jets, Dallas, Kansas City, and Philadelphia.
Well, if there's any counterpart to Buffalo in the NFC, it's Dallas. So,
absolutely.
That could be a mediocre off right there. So, but anyways, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back later in the week. We'll give our top 5 teams then and do all that fun stuff. But 10 weeks in the books, and we're moving on to the second half of the season. So, thanks for everyone for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.